This is the True North Collective podcast, a gathering of unsugar-coated conversations on authenticity, created by the real-life documentation of everyday humans fearlessly finding their true north.
Welcome to Season 3 of the podcast. Hey, it is Jenell here. Excited to be doing a duo episode with Rachel. We are going to be talking about our own journey in finding our true north in 2020 and how the many dots of our journey since we started this podcast are starting to come together. And in this episode, we are going to tease out what's coming in 2021 and what we're looking forward to. This is going to be a two-parter. We hope you enjoy. Now let's jump on into the podcast. Welcome.
Welcome. So, and you and I really didn't talk about this before we hit record, but we can go for it now. Originally, we said we wanted to talk about loneliness and safety. You still feeling good about that?
Oh yeah, totally. Okay. Why do I seem not into it?
No, I mean, you're fine. I'm just curious. I think I'm excited to talk about the topics, and I'm also a little nervous. I feel like loneliness for me has been something I've struggled with for a long time, and I haven't had enough awareness around it to understand why or even to really address it. And I started to do that in 2020. So I say I'm excited, and I'm also like, what's the probability I'm going to cry while talking about this today?
Crying is neither good nor bad. It is a part of the human processing experience.
It is. Well, I've been doing a lot of human processing lately.
It's good.
Yeah.
I will clear that my heart space is a little all over the place today because our family dog passed away unexpectedly yesterday morning. So my parents called me super early, just devastated. Yeah, it was really sad. So her name was Maggie. And I just want to give her a shout out. She's a cool dog. We never had pets growing up because my dad's really allergic, but Maggie was able to tolerate her from an allergy standpoint. And so she was almost 13 years old, but she definitely left sooner than we all wanted. But she was a really cool dog. I'm grateful we got to have her. And yeah, it's just been kind of it's been an interesting 24 hours. So I'll just share that. And so I may have more of a vision or more of a perspective around that feels more life and deathy, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. I think I'm just really connected to the impermanence of life today. So
yeah. What kind of dog?
A Brussels Griffon Shih Tzu mix. Yeah, so the cutest. Just didn't know how small she was, believed she was played with all the big dogs, and just was a big personality. And she was definitely starting to get older. So there's a part of me that's I wonder if, I don't know, it seems I don't know if she really would have wanted to have people watch her get old. And so, in the shamanistic world that I am connected to, there's a process that you go through in ensuring that pets, cross over the bridge safely, and she did. And I'm really grateful that I have those practices because it feels like I can put some ritual to the experience. And I was able to connect with her from an energetic and spiritual standpoint. Whether that anyone believes in it or not kind of doesn't really matter. For me, I was able to connect with her kind of on that spiritual side, and she's super happy. And so, she's not upset. She's not mad at anyone. She's just grateful. And so that was a cool experience to have. And I'm kind of holding it all while also watching my parents really, really struggle, because it was like another child of theirs, truly. It was like the child they never had with me. No, but yeah, it's but I'm really glad, I'm proud of myself for being able to hold that space with them and not get too rocked, honestly. Like, I'm pretty at peace, even though I'm still sad. I've cried a lot.
Of course, yeah.
But I've been way more at peace, and being able to hold my parents' devastation without it becoming my own has been an indication of the work that I've been doing around safety. And so I think this will actually be a cool conversation to look at it through that lens. So anyways, I just needed to clear that.
No, thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Family pets. There's been quite a few people in my life that have had their long-term family pet pass this year, which makes me sad. But obviously it's a part of life. I'm in denial with my pets. I'm like, they'll never pass.
Well, it is. I mean, and it's weird to, I mean, for my parents too. Like, my parents are in their late 60s, and you know, the gradual change of people getting older almost happens before your eyes. And like, one day I'll notice, you know, the way my dad gets up from the couch or something, or the fact that my dad has cancer. You know, like, there's just stuff that's like, oh shit. Like, if they got another dog, and that dog, you know, dogs live 10 to 13 years on average. That means that the next time we would get to that point, they'd be in their 80s. And like, that's old. Like, holy shit. So I don't know, I think there's been like a lot of like, and then my own, me too, like, yeah, so there's a lot of layers to it that I'm just sitting with. Yeah. Like, we never talk about that stuff. Humans.
We really don't.
I had an interesting conversation with my dad last night. I'm definitely like the spiritual one in my immediate family. And it's taken me a while to like own like some of the spiritual conversations that I have and experiences that I have. And it's been cool to actually, since Egypt, they've really been open to hearing some of my experiences, and I'm not too attached either way. So, but anyways, I was talking to my dad last night, and I was like, the Western world doesn't really give us a lot of opportunities to honor death. And so I know we've talked about that on this podcast before, but you know, even for myself, if I was experiencing the loss of like someone so close to me that I spent so much time with all the time, that would be devastating. And he was like, it feels like there's a hole in my heart. Like, how am I gonna? And I was just like, wow, to be the child of my parent and to hold that space for him to feel that devastation and to acknowledge like there hasn't really ever been a place to like acknowledge how sad death is, but then how beautiful it can be and the complexity in it. And you know, because I had cancer when I was 14, I've been wrestling with that for a long time, and I'm still not there by any means. Like, you know, we don't get there, but it was just like an interesting dynamic to share that with him. Like, we don't do, and for him to be like, you're right, we don't. And I don't know, it's just like it's kind of been a bit of an opening too, to have some different kinds of conversations with my parents that I haven't really ever been able to have before, or be there for them in a way, because I wasn't ready to either. So
yeah, it is. Even in our family this year, we had like a small get together for Thanksgiving. Not yesterday, because today we're recording on Black Friday, but last weekend. And for me, I actually haven't been with my family the past couple of Thanksgivings because I was in California, and it just didn't make sense to fly back and then try to fly back for Christmas. But I think for the family unit as a whole, we've had really strong and beautiful traditions that we always have Thanksgiving at the same place with the same people. And so to do it and to not have the same people there just because of COVID safety, but then also I think it's been hitting people pretty hard this year, just the quote unquote empty seats of people who have passed away, or my cousin just went into the military, so he's gone, you know, just those small little holes in sitting in that. And we've also been watching a lot of old family videos, which is really cool. But I think my uncle said at one point, because we did watch one with during our Thanksgiving celebration, it's just like it it's really sweet and it's really cool to see, and it's also kind of heartbreaking. So I've also been sitting in that, just like how things do change. And my cousin actually just had his, basically they never got married for multiple reasons, but basically lifelong partner passed away pretty suddenly. It wasn't COVID related, but gosh, like 3 or 4 months ago. So just kind of sitting with that, it was a really interesting dynamic. And people, it's hard. You can see the pain in someone, but you don't necessarily know, is it an appropriate time to talk about it? How do you honor the dead? I had a friend that just told me on their family members' birthdays that have passed away, they'll eat their favorite food and like do their favorite activity. I thought that was really beautiful. But definitely sitting in that with my family of kind of, it's the empty seats are there, but no one's talking about them still because we just don't know. People just don't know how to approach it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you that because so I do a monthly, or I'm part of a monthly young adult cancer support group, and it was just this Tuesday, and we were talking about the holidays, and a lot of people in the group are still going through treatments, and so they were like, it's weird because you go to these holiday get-togethers and you're, people are talking about stuff, and like you don't want to be like, let's talk about this terrible trauma that I'm experiencing that that's really uncomfortable, and then they're like, and I want to talk about it because I'm experiencing trauma and it's traumatic and it sucks, and I want people to be with me. And then they were like, yeah, or we were all saying like, and then you as the person holding the trauma are like, and I can tell that everybody's doesn't really know what to do because it's there. And then somebody said something brilliant. She was like, really all I want most of the time, and this might not be for everybody, but I was like, fuck yeah, that's totally how I feel. She was like, sometimes I just want people to acknowledge how shitty it is, and to even just say like, and it's on both sides for the door to be open. Like, it's not just, and literally anyone has the opportunity to say something. And a lot of times, like, the most healing thing can just be the community acknowledgement of the fact that something sucks. Like, we were all saying we don't really want it to be solved. And I'll speak from I usually don't want it to be solved. I usually don't want you to sugarcoat it or tell me that it's going to be okay. I don't want you to ignore it. I don't want you to rush past it. I want you to sit with me while we acknowledge that it fucking sucks. That's it. And everybody on the Zoom was just kind of like, yeah, totally. Just acknowledge how much it fucking sucks. And then usually there's like a collective like, and then we can move forward. So anyways, I just share that because for many, many years in my family, we did not talk about the cancer. We did not talk about, you just kind of like, oh, we want to make sure to not bring anything up that's going to like stir the pot too much. Yeah. But like, that's what being human's all about. And I know we're going to get into it, but I'll just share one more thing. What's been coming up for me lately as I've been, working on cultivating safety, which has been a huge part of this year for me, is the recognition that I have tried so hard to learn from other people's mistakes so that I could avoid experiencing what I saw them experience from their quote unquote perceived mistake. And so it was like, well, if I can know it, then I don't have to go through it. But the fact of the matter is that as a human, like the only way to get anywhere, like we have to experience it on our own. You can't bypass any of it. And so it's one thing to know, but I have to actually experience these things that I am avoiding. Otherwise, if I'm avoiding them, no matter how healthy or evolved the thought process and the concept might be, if I am just trying to like get to the other side before I'm bypassing it, which means that I'm actually operating in self-defeating ways, and I'm just delaying the inevitable. I'm actually causing harm for myself and other people around me. So I've been sitting in that a lot of like, where in my life have I been trying to get it right because I've seen other people get it wrong, and I don't want to experience the outpouring that I saw come from that, when by just allowing myself to experience it is human, and to know how to just work through it and feel the difficulty. That's the only way, and to really be in it, that's really the only way to get through it. Otherwise, I'm just masking it and creating weird fucking programs that don't allow me to actually be me. So yeah.
That brings up a lot. I think when we talk about the logical, like you logically know something, but like emotionally you're not there, I think a lot of that ties into what you're saying. And then even being a younger sibling, I feel like there was a lot in my life where I'd watch my sister do something and you're like, oh shit, I'm not gonna do that because I saw the outcome, and some of which is good, but there were also lessons that were lost, or it was then more about like being perfect and not getting in trouble versus having my own experiences. Like I would avoid things that I could have learned from just because I watched someone else go through it and be like, ooh, there was pain there was anger, there was shame there, I'm just not going to do it. And it, it is what it is, but I would most likely have stepped into adulthood with additional tools if I would have allowed myself to go through those processes. I'm also going to like backtrack quite a bit, but there's someone in my life who has another friend that recently was diagnosed with cancer, and you helped the conversation. Not that it was my friend that had cancer, but again, like a second degree in my life, but just like not really knowing what to say and like, how do you address it? And can you ask the question? There's like a curiosity around, how severe is it? Is it, stage 1? Are you just going to go through treatment? Or is this you bringing it up, or this person bringing it up because they might not live that much longer, so there was curiosity obviously there. And the person I was talking to like didn't know what to ask their friend. And I was like, honestly, from what I've heard, and obviously everyone is different, but from my friends that have gone through cancer, like they don't want you to tiptoe around it. Like they want to be seen. And the fact that we tiptoe around death or pain or discomfort, it's not allowing a person to be fully seen, and making probably them in turn feeling like a little bit more shame around it too. That I'm like, oh, and I'll speak from, I'm not in this scenario, but in other ones, it's like if I'm suffering or in pain or whatever it is for whatever reason, and people don't want to acknowledge or address it, then all of a sudden I feel like a burden to everyone around me. And rather than feeling seen and feeling that safety of sharing, I all of a sudden want to isolate because I don't want to be a burden to the people around me. And because I can't be fully seen in whatever state I'm in, it creates a severe disconnect from me and everyone else around me. And if you're going through something like cancer, death, whatever big event it is, it's sad that we end up potentially being put into that space of isolation just because we feel like we're just burdening other people with who we are.
You just validated my entire existence from 14 to probably 29, probably longer, honestly, 34. I mean, that's literally exactly. The work I'm doing this year is in recognizing that I am not a monster, that I am not a burden, that I am not, because I've been working on codependency pretty heavily, like really facing it and like holding a mirror up. And I didn't realize how much I already had codependent tendencies from my family upbringing, but having cancer and having the label of courageous and like all this stuff that is meant to probably empower. And for me, it like further like dug in my codependency in ensuring that the way I set myself up, the way I operated, the way I existed in the world was to ensure that I was not putting any more of a burden onto somebody else by being me. And so I've been super unpacking that, and I feel so seen right now by you saying that. So thank you.
I'm sure I picked up a lot of that just from listening to your experience too. And knowing that like I've never had cancer or that experience, but like we've talked about in the podcast, like I have felt that in so many facets of my life. That who I we're gonna have a really emotional podcast. So I'm about to start crying too, but that who I am is a burden on other people. And so that vulnerability of being seen and like putting myself out there, I didn't do. And that'll be a segue into loneliness today too, because that's a huge part of why I spent the first 26 years of my life feeling completely alone all the time. And even more so and into recently, but it's definitely started to diminish more and more. So
yeah. Well, I see you. I feel seen. So is there something specific that you wanted to talk about around loneliness?
I feel like kicking it off, just somewhat sharing my experience, and then because I have like one of my 2020 things has been practicing being vulnerable and being open. And as I just mentioned, I went through most of my life just always feeling alone, like alone and sad. And I'm still playing with this sad part because I'll be honest, like I think I'm a happy person in a lot of ways, and I have fun and I do cool things, but in a lot of the moments of stillness, there's still like a lot of sadness that could be because I didn't process it most of my life. It could, it could be for a lot of reasons. I had that feeling of loneliness. Like it didn't matter if I was in, a room full of people. It didn't matter if I felt like I had friends. Like I still felt really lonely all the time. And I would ask other people, and a lot of people tell me that they're like, oh, sure, I feel like lonely sometimes. But for me, it was like this chronic sense of loneliness that I only recently started to unpack, and I mentioned it started to diminish for sure. But I had never heard someone have a conversation about it. Like I felt alone in my loneliness, if that makes sense, because anytime I would muster up the courage to even potentially have a conversation about it or like ask someone else about it, people would be like, I don't feel that. And so one of my thoughts in bringing it up is that there are probably other people that have experienced that sense of chronic loneliness that maybe haven't heard anyone else address it.
When you say loneliness, I don't know if I've used those words before. I definitely have felt very different. Like I felt like I don't fit in. I don't necessarily like belong to any group. Like when I was in high school and junior high, even in college, like pretty much my whole life. I feel like I've always been like, I'm a little bit this and I'm a little bit that, and I never like fully in any one group. And I had friends, but it was never like anyone's best friend. Well, that's not true. I have had best friends and stuff, but so I don't know. I think when you started talking, I was like, I don't know if I would have ever called it loneliness either, because I always felt like I had people around, but I have always felt different. Like I'm not totally like everybody else, or like where I want to go with conversations, people don't want to go there. And so that's how I explained it. Or isolation. Like I've felt that I can see looking back on my life, the times when I have been in disassociation, which I'll speak to when we get to when we talk about safety, but like those moments where I self-isolated, because I didn't, it was like I don't know, it was like, I don't, so yeah, I think I felt like, yeah, I don't know. It is interesting, the loneliness piece. Because I don't know if I would have called it that either. But I definitely feel versions of it.
Like you said, I mean, and I had friends, and this is me breaking in my process and trying to explore it, of like, why had I always felt like that? And I think it's kind of twofold, to see if any of this connects with you and what you were saying. But one being that I just didn't have a lot of like real connection in my life. It was, and we could break this down a lot, and we've even probably talked about this a little bit, but like that was probably one of the reasons why I was drawn to you, because it's like I was seeking this connection that I wasn't getting in my relationships, and I could spend time with people, but I would leave that time still feeling really alone, and like you, I mean, it was like separate. And so I think that was one part of it, is there wasn't a lot of depth in my life, in my relationships. And this is not me pointing a finger, it's me also acknowledging that I didn't have a lot of depth into who I was as a person. Therefore, even if someone else wanted that, or was even maybe feeling the same way, like we wouldn't have gotten there, because I didn't necessarily know how to do it yet. Like we could have maybe started, but I was spending probably I was spending too much time focusing on what I thought other people wanted, and therefore I never felt seen, because like I didn't really know who I was that well, and
Yeah.
therefore it just like everything felt very empty. That would be another word I would chronically, like if I look back in my journals, right, that I just felt empty all the time.
Yeah. I wonder if me having cancer was like an easy scapegoat for me to go, well, I am different. Like, I just am. And so instead of feeling, and I didn't feel empty because I felt too much, I was just like,
Yeah.
I feel too much. And why can't I feel less? And so I think for me, it was like easy for me to just be like, I am different, which is interesting. What's coming up for me right now is the Enneagram,
Yeah.
because my Enneagram number is 4, which is like wanting to feel like you are special and you've made some sort of impact in the world. That's my interpretation of it today, which is interesting that the flip of that is being different. So like, I don't know, it's like I almost like tried to turn that into a superpower to make myself feel better or something, so that I didn't feel like totally ostracized or something. I don't know.
It is really interesting, because I would say now the more I'm getting to know me and shed a lot of those layers and conditioning and things, that I actually think I do feel really deeply, but I had to learn to just suppress it. And in turn, when you just don't feel any of it, there's the emptiness. And so that has been interesting, because I will say now, in specifically 2020, there have not been that many moments where I've felt that. And I felt that way for years. But now I also, if I'm feeling something, I don't numb it out, which is a huge part of 2020, right? I talked about how I stopped really watching TV. I mean, I still do, but not very often, which used to be what I would do almost every single night, because I didn't want to deal with my life. You know, I don't drink very much anymore. Like, I've tried to limit my social media use, which is still probably one of my biggest crutches. But, you know, just being more like aware of the things that I'm doing. I mean, even like things that are positive, which we've talked about on other episodes this year, like working out. It's like yes, working out can be a good thing. And if you're doing it to avoid and numb out, then it's not necessarily a useful tool. So just really looking at all of that and like actually sitting in my emotions has alleviated a lot of that emptiness.
Yeah. There's what I love what you said earlier, which was the disconnection because, well, I'm going to say what I heard. I was disconnected with myself, therefore I could not connect to others. And I can relate to that so hard because when you said you wanted to do a topic on loneliness, the first thing that came up for me is I had a coaching session with Ranit, who we had on the podcast earlier this year. And I was talking to her about whatever my topic was. And she said to me, "Are you lonely?" And I was like, well, I got this community and like this partner and this thing and like this thing. And she's like, "Are you lonely?" And I was like, fuck, yeah, I'm fucking lonely. I'm totally fucking lonely. Like, I don't feel like I have, where do I feel seen? And like, anyways, and so that's the part that I was so fascinated with, that is kind of stuck with me through the second half of the year, is that, or whenever I talked to her, I can't remember, that that you can feel lonely when you're with people close to you, and that loneliness I'm seeing now that is an indicator that I'm disconnected from myself. And as I've been able to build up my own sense of self, I'll say, so like the parts and pieces of me, my inner kids, my body, my soul, my shadows, as I have gotten to know these pieces and built up a relationship there, I have felt a lot less alone, and I've felt less like I needed to reach so far out to other people for the things that I wasn't giving to myself, so that I could instead genuinely connect with another person, instead of using that connection as a way to get something for myself to feel okay. Yeah.
I've been reflecting a lot on this topic and many things. So if anyone listened to, I think it was season 2, right, where we really started to focus on making friends as an adult, because that was right when I moved to California. Like I got really intentional with that. A lot of the why behind it. Not only did I just move to a new place, so naturally you want new friends and like to make friends, but a lot of that season 2 was driven by the fact that I had felt lonely. And I'll share now that it's interesting to me, like in some of my more dark, sad moments, the thing that I hold on to the most is how grateful I am for the group of friends that I built up now, very intentionally, and like letting go of people that didn't make me feel this way, like allowing myself to be seen, allowing to do my friendships and relationships differently than I had done it before, and just like how much gratitude I have for having that in my life. And you and I talked about this even in our friendship, but I think when you show up that way too, it comes from such a calm place that I don't hold on to it as tightly as like I used to hold on. It's like if a friend left, I made it about me. I made it about my own worth. And not to say I'm never going to have those feelings again, or like I won't experience that, but now I think it's so much easier just to be like, I showed up exactly how I wanted to. I allowed people to see me. I didn't put on a facade. And if they walk away, like I actually don't feel that loneliness or emptiness from it as much, because I know that I did it to the best of like my ability, and I was the person that I wanted to be in it. And I'm also learning how to do that in romantic relationships now, which I've never done before, and I'm still struggling with it, to be honest. Like there are times, like you had mentioned, it's like you're reaching for things you're not giving yourself, and then it starts to build a resentment almost, because all of a sudden this person is not giving you what you need, and it's an unfair expectation. And so I'm just like finding myself trying to take what I've learned in friendships too and replicate that in right now a romantic relationship, too, of like, okay, what am I doing here? What am I not giving myself? And then also, how do I continue to stay open? Because that is something I've discovered about myself too, is like I have a lot of distrust, a ton of stories around people and people leaving me and like being the victim of that experience. So in times when I'm like, man, you know, I'm feeling a little this way, it's like I kind of just have to like continue to turn back in. And it's like, if you were not worried or afraid of losing someone or worried or afraid about the outcome, like what would you do here? And generally for me, it's like I would actually say how I'm feeling. Like, and a lot of times it's like a very positive thing, but I realized how much I've held back even positive things out of fear. It's like, I'm afraid I like this person more than they like me. So rather than looking like the quote unquote idiot who's giving more, I'll just keep it to myself and it prevents that depth. And so it's just like it, again, I'm not like to some sort of finish line in this, but I'm seeing those patterns and being in, because I'm currently staying out with my parents. I think a lot of people, if you've been listening to the podcast, you know that, but back in like my, you know, my childhood bedroom, living where I grew up from ages 0 to 18, because I lived in this house my entire adolescence. It's been interesting to see like this new version of me, this person I want to be, and then being in a space where I never was that person before, and like the contrast is showing up even more so than before, I think, just because of like the environment I'm in. So it's been really interesting just like to analyze that. So I'm kind of rambling, but I hope that other people would be like, oh yeah, that, like I've felt that or thought that, or maybe haven't thought that aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's super relatable. And um, first of all, I feel like I can say this to you now, but like, I think you going back to your childhood experience is like such a gift for you because to be able to relive, like to see and experience yourself show up differently in that environment, it's like source. Like I moved away from my childhood home, so like I have gone back to Libertyville and re-experienced Libertyville in a different way, but um and I've experienced people from my past in different ways, but like you kind of get to go back to like, I don't know, like a memory from a doorway and like stand there and honor the past while recognizing that you're here now and what's here now and where do you want to go. Like that's pretty powerful. So as much as it might be like a lot and suck, you're getting to like experientially transform that stuff, and that's pretty cool.
I'll say it is cool and it sucks, like you said.
For sure.
And I think one of the biggest things is just like for me right now, and I'm like we're getting really vulnerable, but sitting at like in this moment of acknowledging how easy it is to regress. And I don't think it's true regression, right? Like you can't, like I know inside me, like I can't unlearn the things that I've learned and like this person that I want to be. But I do think it's very easy to fall back into old dynamics. But now it's like and I don't love this phrase, but it's like I know better, quote unquote, again, I'm like quoting again. But like still falling back into those experiences. So I'll say I'm like, oh, I've been doing all this work, and it is a lot of internal work, but I will not proudly say it's been externally reflected yet.
And that's okay.
At least not in this scenario or environment.
Yeah. I mean, you've been there a few weeks.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. And I'm definitely trying to have grace. And I've been doing like, it's kind of funny, maybe funny is not the right word, but been doing like inner child work while I'm here too. Just like really always just diving in. So still processing internally and not necessarily externally.
Yeah, I feel like I want to acknowledge you saying that because I've never heard it really said in that way of like processing and experiencing something internally versus like the external
Mhm.
output or like influence that happens as a result of that. And like that is really true. Like, and especially I think it can be really frustrating for me when I'm doing this work and then my external environment doesn't match what I am, what I, where I want to be. And I know we've talked about that. There's like a quote related to creativity by Ira Glass that speaks to an artist or a creative person at the beginning of their journey when they're like, their tastes are at this level. That's why they're doing it. But there's a big gap. And no one ever talks about that gap in between, like having to show up and make like 1,000, 5,000, 50,000, bad light bulbs in order to get to the light bulb that works, in order to get to the place where the output matches or the external matches the internal. So I appreciate it within this context because I don't know if I necessarily had like felt it that way before. I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
It's definitely it's when I meet new people now and the relationships that I've built that I was just speaking to that I'm so grateful for, it's so much easier. The stakes are so much lower to come in as this new evolved person that you are and to start it out and to build that foundation there and to do it in older relationships that have history. Like that's where it's like the next level up for me right now of like, okay, now how do I do that there? Because I know that this internal change has taken place. I know the person that I want to be, but I'm sitting in the reality that this internal person that I am now is not matching external behavior in this environment. And that's the gap. And that's hard when it's like, damn it, you know you can do this. Like you've done it. Why aren't you doing it here? And it's like, again, there's like a lot of reasons for that. Old conditioning, old dynamics. It's when you're building new relationships, I think you attract people that are seeking the same thing or like in a potentially similar places to you. So to have to go back and do it in a different realm has been,
I mean, that's the fucking work right there.
oh, I know. And it is work.
And
Sure.
the payoff in those relationships is unbelievable. Like I'll speak for myself, not because the other person necessarily changes, but it's like to witness and experience myself handle situations differently. It's like, yeah, I can step into a new relationship and basically reinvent myself, so to speak, and like set that standard. And yeah, that feels good. But to be able to stand in that truth of who I am today amongst a situation that normally would have rocked me to the core, and it is rocking me to the core, but I am even an ounce different is like, I don't know. There's nothing else like it. I think that's why I keep stepping into this work, even though it's like hard. I mean,
all I want to do is run. Like, that's
yeah.
like
I mean, this
all I
isn't,
want to do.
being human is not for the faint of heart, especially
No.
when we're being human within a society that has created a world to try and avoid experiencing anything other than happiness. And like we have done that. We have all signed up for it. And it is starting to crack, but we are getting to witness the result of what happens. And obviously there's a lot more to that, but it's like, what happens when I guess the other thing is like I have to acknowledge the fact that Thanksgiving is like the essence of the idea of having a day dedicated to gratitude, and what it's like in essence we thought has stood for is like beautiful, like the coming together, the connection, the bringing together of different cultures, the gratitude for the things that we have, the sharing, the community. Hell yes. the reality that it's built on, and the fact that we have been unable to just own the humanness, own the genocide, own all of it. I mean, and to bring it back to me, it's like we haven't had a society in America, I'll say, that has been based upon just owning our shit, because we're humans. We're not gods. We're not like, none of us is like has all these answers. Like, and so like, I don't know, I was having a conversation with Dylan because we went up to Milwaukee to celebrate Thanksgiving with his family early. And then we drove back down to Dallas through Oklahoma, which is a lot of old Indian land and Native American land. And as we're driving through, because there are parts of Oklahoma that are still very, very, very old ways of thinking. And it's scary, honestly. And we're sitting there, and Dylan said, what would our society have looked like? What would our world, our country have looked like if, when colonists came over to this country and saw that it was already inhabited, they said, holy shit, you guys really know how to use land. And like, hey, we actually know about this stuff. What could we do if we came together and honored like what you guys do really well and what y'all do really well and what we do really well? What can we do here? Like, this is your land. We also like, where are the space? And that didn't happen. And then a few days later, so yesterday on actual Thanksgiving, I spent the morning kind of reading about the tribes that used to inhabit the land in Dallas, because I was like, I really want to know what the history was here. And I'll actually link to the article that I found. And so we read it, and I was like, even this, it's like, we could sit here and be like, well, this all happened, so we need to just pretend it didn't happen in order to be able to move forward because it is what it is. But no, actually, we still have an opportunity today to be able to go, okay, I'm going to own and accept that this was my part in this. And we can do, what if we tried doing it differently? We fucked some stuff up. Like, where does that ability to just own instead of pretend that it never existed? And so for me personally, in order to be able to move forward, I have had to really look at myself and not talk about, I think I've talked about the ways in which I have acted unsavory, I'll say, in like a jokey way or an extreme way or shock value way, or like, I have done this before. But the fact of the matter is that I still have rage within me. I have a lot of anger, actually. And, I can say it's warranted and all that stuff, and it is, and we all have it, and it's mine. And me being able to sit and say that rage actually came from a place of narcissism. It came from a place of codependency, and to learn about it and then to be able to own it so that I can actually show up with somebody and not manipulatively, because I'm trying to keep myself safe, which is actually not, it's perpetuating my unsafety and perpetuating my survival. And in that, I'm now forcing other people to co-create my survival with me, is like asinine. It's just like, but again, we aren't really necessarily talking about the fact that we all are human, and as humans, we make mistakes. As humans, we have rage. As humans, we can see beauty, and we can also cause a lot of harm for ourselves and others. But when we pretend that there's a whole part of us that doesn't exist, or we try to make it something different than it is to make ourselves feel better about who we want to be, we never actually get to be the person that we want to be. So
yeah, it's the elephants in the room that no one wants to talk about, and
which is being human, which is literally the aspects of humanity that seem unsavory that are fucking real.
And I started laughing at some point at the beginning because when you were talking about Thanksgiving and like the how we could have just all come together and been like, hey, like, what do you have to bring to the table? What do I have to bring to the table? It's I think that's a lot of family dynamics, you know, completely. And specifically around the holidays, I know in my experience, I view the world incredibly different than my family does. And that's, you know, it's hard. Like that's a hard place to be in the sense that you feel like the outcast, you feel like the black sheep, and you don't feel heard. And if you try to share your thoughts and opinions, you know, a lot of times people don't want to listen. Like they all want to just prove you wrong. And I know that the people in my family have also felt that in other dynamics, right? And I've also probably shown up that way too, but haven't had the quote unquote numbers on my side necessarily, you know, in this scenario to have the same impact. But I've been trying very hard and not perfectly to listen and to try to hear where we do agree. And I've kind of given up thinking that I'm going to change anyone's opinion because I do think that's a lost cause. But at very minimum, it's like, where can we have some harmony to be able to move forward with some good intent? And it's not easy, but anyway, that just came up for me, and I didn't mute myself and I started laughing. So I felt like that explanation needed to be added in because it's very relatable, I think, to a lot of family dynamics and a lot of just communities too right now, and with how we are right now in the United States and how we can be pretty divided on many, you know, different topics, thought processes, ways of life. Not all politically related, but obviously with the election, like that is a huge conversation too.
We are going to take an intermission and make this a two-parter. Part 1, done. Hope your ears have enjoyed this listening experience. And part 2 will be released shortly. In part 2, we're going to continue this conversation and start to talk about safety, what we're excited for in 2021, and connect the dots in 2020 on our own journey and how this podcast has helped us live our own true north. We're fellow travelers here with you all, and we appreciate you listening. This has been another episode of the True North Collective podcast. For more from Rachel and I, check us out on the gram at the True North Collective _. And make sure you're signed up for our mailing list. That's where we send out all the details on our upcoming events, our monthly community gatherings, and so much more. We love you. We appreciate you. See you in part 2.